Hey, Em. How are you doing, girl? Welcome to another episode of Miguel. All right, so it is the 11th of September, 2018. And oddly enough, I did not get a lot of sleep last night. so, or at least I don't think I did. One thing about sleep is that I might feel like I'm awake a lot of the time through the night, but now I know that I go through this period where my body relaxes and it gets micro sleeps. And these little periods of sleepiness or being asleep are periods that I don't recognize as having been asleep. And so I think I'm up for like 6 hours at a time, but throughout the day, I'm not tired at all. And my explanation for that is that I unconsciously go into these micro sleep modes during the night, very short periods where my brain is taking care of itself. And I am so grateful that my brain does that. Thankfully, my brain takes care of itself. Somehow, it figures out a way to fall asleep, and then it doesn't let me know about it. Which is good. I'm so grateful to have a body that takes care of itself. You know, it breathes by itself, the heart beats by itself, the blood pumps by itself, the DNA replicates by itself. It doesn't even need my input. Whew. That's a load off my shoulders. The work of being alive is reduced to me to just keeping safe and eating food and drinking water. Hey, I think I can handle that. That ought not be that big a deal, right? I only need to eat 3 times a day. What a bargain that is in terms of efficiency and time saved. Yeah. Okay. Well, it's time for peaceful living again. That's right. Peaceful Living is a book written by Mary McKenzie, and it's in calendar form, and there are generally aphorisms in it, and I don't know, it's a way to start the day. So here is the reading for September 11th, and this is the quote. "The greatest thing in the world is to know how to be one's own self." Michael Equiem de Montaigne. I'll read that again. "The greatest thing in the world is to know how to be one's own self." You know, let me say a few words about this just from my own experience. I really like this quote, and I think it's apt, certainly for me right now. You know, I know that I personally really love to have other people's approval. Approval is really important to me. Though the problem with approval is that approval seeking is that sometimes you put on a persona, a mask, or a facade to show you as a person who might be different than you actually are. And therein lies the problem. You know, it takes a lot of energy to put on a different face. And sometimes the approval that you seek, even when you put on that face, you don't receive. So it's a gamble, right? And in the process, you lose yourself a little bit. You become separate from yourself. You might say to yourself, you know, I want this person's approval, so I'll change in this way and in this fashion. And it's different from what you really want. And because of that separation, because you're not acting in harmony with what you want, there's a loss there. You sort of lose your own identity. You lose yourself. And you lose what's important to you, what's valuable to you, what matters to you. There's a really great loss in exchange for something you might not have really needed anyway. You know, I can imagine that people think they need other people's approval. but it may not be true. It's possible. I was thinking today about early man. You and I, we come from a long series of Homo sapiens who, have grown and developed and evolved over time. And a lot of the time, these Homo sapiens lived in small tribes of maybe 10, 15 people. Maybe some lived in larger tribes. Yeah. Maybe 10,000 people, perhaps. Maybe even a little bit more. But my guess is that generally throughout our life, our family size or tribe size may not have gotten over 50 people. That makes a lot of sense to me. So, and what I'm trying to say, and sometimes what I'm trying to say is that the way human beings evolved is that we evolved in very small groups of people, maybe 5 people or even 10 people. I think we might have been lucky if our tribe was greater than 10. So really, we are at heart loners in the sense that we are very good at surviving with just ourselves and maybe a few people in our close circle, if that. And we really don't need that. Now approval is important, certainly. If we're only a part of a tribe of 10 other people, if that tribe kicked us out for some reason, we'd be on our own, and we could easily die because we don't have the cooperation and help of our partners. So, that's why approval is so important. But on another level, human beings are so resilient. We can get along with very little. Like I mentioned earlier in this video, we can get along with just some food and water and acting safe. And we can live our lives out and be relatively happy. We are that robust of a living species. And that's phenomenal. That is an amazing strength that humans have. Our ability to thrive in isolation. And also, it's also something that makes a connection with others difficult. It's challenging. I mean, if nobody really needs the approval of anyone else, if nobody really needs anyone else for much of anything at all, then what would drive us to connect with another person? Yeah. Connection is important, though human beings, we can thrive without it. There are plenty of people out there, hermits, for example, who live their lives in caves for 20, 30 years, and they're okay, taking care of their own needs, doing things that they enjoy, having fun. Their version of fun, which might be, it might be amazing. As a solo person, you've got amazing freedom to do what you want when you want to do it. That in itself is a dream for a lot of people. And so, anyway, I really went off on a tangent off that quote. Let's continue along with Mary McKenzie and what she has to say about it. The subtitle is Finding Our True Self. She goes on to say, many years ago, I reached an all-time low in my self-esteem. I really thought that I didn't deserve love. I realized that I had spent years running from this belief, striving for more promotions and recognition so that I could hide my deep fear that I was a worthless human being. I was terrified of being found out. Then one day I decided to stop the race. I wanted to face up to the fear. If I was a worthless person, then I wanted to accept this fact and figure out how to live within that reality. Or if I was a valuable human being, I wanted to know that, so I could stop the messages of worthlessness that ran incessantly through my head. In a sense, I longed to know who I was, not who I told myself I was. I began to face myself honestly that day and embarked on a journey of discovering my feelings, needs, and values. I learned that everyone is valuable, lovable, and important to our world's evolution. Now I concern myself more with living in harmony with my needs and values, which I see as my true self. And the aphorism she ends with in this passage is, be aware of your value today and act accordingly. Well, let me respond to that. I really like that, be aware of your value today. That makes good sense to me. The second part, and act accordingly, I'm a little vague about that. Maybe that's it. Act as if you were valuable, or act valuable, or regard yourself and others as valuable. Be aware of your value today. Regard yourself and others as valuable as you go about your daily life. Yeah. I think one component of valuing yourself is self-care. Self-care right now in our culture is really important. People talk, when I think of self-care, I think of things like self-compassion, kindness to oneself and to others. I also think of yoga. I'm not sure why. Though I think that it's regarded as a modality for self-care, to support self-care. Exercise, education, nutrition. That's something that's really highly valued today. It's a form of self-care. Medical care, that's a form of self-care. Even mental health care is a form of self-care. Yeah. If you value yourself, you'll take care of it. You'll maintain it, right? If you have a car that you really value, you'll maintain it. You'll protect it from harm. Maybe you'll insure it. Maybe you'll drive it less or drive it more, depending on what it needs, in order to be well maintained. Yeah. Treat your body that way. Care for it. Clean it. Maintain it. Use it appropriately. Not too fast, not too slow, right? Keep it going. Keep the engine and the wheels greased, right? So there was one or two points that I wanted to address here in this passage. One was the sentence, or if I was a valuable human being, I wanted to know that so I could stop the messages of worthlessness that ran incessantly through my head. I think I want to talk about this, messages of worthlessness that ran incessantly through my head. I think that human beings, our brains have a tendency to focus on phrases or statements or meanings or attitudes, and we'll dwell on those ideas. And the pathways in our nervous system are well tread when it comes to these ideas, and a lot of the time these ideas aren't very helpful. Mary McKenzie was talking about this idea that continually showed up in her mind, which was that she was worthless. Other people have other ideas that show up. One that shows up for me is, what's wrong with me? That's a phrase. It's an attitude, a feeling that comes up a lot for me. I know that for other people, it's like other phrases that might come up for them are things like, I don't matter. Or, there are these phrases that have energy and power, and they're continually repeated in our minds. It's like a little mantra that we continually tell ourselves. And this mantra isn't precisely true. In fact, I've examined my own little mantra that somehow I came up with and settled in my brain. And I recognize that it has almost no cognitive content. It just happens to be a thought that just falls from the sky like a raindrop. And it's not even personal. Now, the feelings have an impact on me. The content of the phrases, when examined, don't result in much. It's just a feature of the brain, or maybe even a bug, that we catch these mantras, these phrases, and we just continually say them to ourselves. And I'm not sure if there's really a way to stop that kind of thinking. Theoretically there is. I mean, it's just called thought stopping. There's a way for you to, if you happen to have one of those ideas show up, as soon as you can, my suggestion is to recognize it and then think of something else. Put energy in another direction, maybe a more useful direction. But these statements that we tend to dwell on, I'm not sure what their purpose is. Maybe it's like it's the brain that's creating a sense of uncertainty that like, what am I doing now? And then we respond to that uncertainty with acts that reduce the uncertainty. And so I can see it as a protective mechanism. The brain and the body is trying to protect itself, and it just uses this continual statement of uncertainty to sort of get us to act and reduce the uncertainty continually in all aspects of our lives. In that way, these kind of phrases that we say to ourselves incessantly, while they're not personal, might be there for our protection. That makes good sense to me. Unfortunately, there is a little bit of pain related to that strategy. And, I'm not sure that strategy works all that well sometimes. Anyway, let's see. What else did I want to make a comment on? Here's a phrase, or here's a statement in the passage. Mary Mackenzie says, "In a sense, I long to know who I was, not who I told myself I was." So, to me, that statement is significant because, there's quite often a difference between who we are and how we identify ourselves. Who we are is this entity, this behaving entity, this attentive behaving entity. And, we try to label ourselves, understand ourselves, describe ourselves, and we do the best we can. And we're trying to match the words that we know, the phrases, the attitudes we know, the story we know, to who we think we actually are. And we can be wrong. It's possible to be wrong about who you think you are. There are a lot of people who don't have clear ideas, a clear understanding of who they are. And that's not to say that they don't have some understanding. And, some people have more understanding than others about who they are. It's hard to look at yourself objectively and to make declarative sentences about, who you are. But then again, a lot of that information is based on the past and memories of the past, understanding about the future. Okay, thanks for bearing with me. I lost a battery in that very moment. That's the first time that's happened during a shoot. So anyway, we're back on track. Let's see if I can remember what I was talking about. I was talking about how we characterize ourselves. You know, characterizing ourselves involves things like, identifying who we think we are based on our past and our guesses about the future and our context. And, it often involves judgments. It's like we are putting Post-it notes onto ourselves. We're saying, oh, we're like this, and we're like that, and we're like this. And we do our best to describe who we are. Yeah. And we're only doing our best. These are guesses. Quite often, they're generalizations. And we could be wrong. And sometimes we are. In fact, we almost always are necessarily, because we're always changing. We're such dynamic beings, human beings. So anyway, I'm not really sure where that was going. But anyway, that's Peaceful Living by Mary Mackenzie. Stay tuned for the next installment. So, I've got a few things that I could possibly do now. I think I'll give this a try. So I went by the library and I picked up a book. It's a picture book, and I figured we'd just read it and have some fun with it. So here we go. Now, I'm not a big fan of the judgments that they're using in this book, but for the sake of humor, let's just go with it. See what it's like. Now, I have not read this book before, so we're both exploring this book together. Here we go. So, in fact, let me move to the side here. All right, this is working. And so, Flabby Cat and Slobby Dog. That's the title of this book. All right. Flabby Cat and Slobby Dog by Jeanne Willis and Tony Ross. Flabby Cat was sitting on the sofa when in came Slobby Dog. He sat next to her like he'd always done since they were small, but today they just couldn't get comfortable. "I'm all squashed," said Slobby Dog. "This sofa has shrunk." "Nonsense," said Flabby Cat. "The cushions have grown." "That's it," said Slobby Dog. "It's very uncomfortable. Whatever shall we do?" said Flabby Cat. "Let's do what we always do," said Slobby Dog. And there they are, having a conversation amongst dishes that are in the sink. And then there's food here at the bottom, cakes and fish and bread and a banana. Apparently dogs or cats eat bananas. Maybe they don't eat bananas. It's uneaten. All right. So they ate and ate and ate, and they slept and slept and slept. It was all very comforting, but when they woke up, there they are. They're eating fish and bread, and it looks like peas and french fries and Jell-O. And that's them falling asleep. See them in their PJs. And look at the mice. They've got some kind of, brisket. Sandwiches that are uneaten, partially eaten, and then a drumstick. The sofa has shrunk even smaller, and the cushions had grown even bigger, or so they liked to think. "It's a frightful squeeze," said Slobby Dog. "Whatever shall we do now?" asked Flabby Cat. "What we always do," said Slobby Dog. So they ate and ate and ate, and they slept and slept and slept. It was all very comforting, but when they woke up, the sofa had practically disappeared, and the cushions almost filled the room, or so they imagined. "We'll never get comfortable," said Slobby Dog. "Whatever shall we do?" cried Flabby Cat. "Eat and sleep?" "No, let's do something completely different," said Slobby Dog. "Let's watch TV." Okay, so this is pretty funny because this picture gets you to think that they're going to start exercising, but nope, they're going to watch TV instead. So that's what they did. They watched a show about a cunning tiger and a wild wolf. And while they were watching, they ate and ate and ate. And they slept and slept and slept. It was all very comforting. But when they woke up, the sofa had shrunk. The room had shrunk. The whole house had shrunk. Or so they believed. There is no room for us here, said Flabby Cat. Wherever shall we live? Perhaps the cunning tiger and the wild wolf will let us live with them, said Sloppy Dog. They are our distant relatives, after all. Agreed, Flabby Cat. Let's go and ask. But their distant relatives were a lot more distant than they thought. Sloppy Dog and Flabby Cat walked and walked through streets and cities. Here they are. I think this is them. They sailed across several seas. They searched fields and forests, mountains and deserts. But they couldn't find the cunning tiger and the wild wolf. When they were hungry, they had to hunt for food. So they couldn't eat. And eat and eat. When they were thirsty, they had to look for water. There was no time to sleep and sleep. They were too busy trying to stay alive. Look at this. And look, there's sharks in the water. This is water they're trying to get at to drink. And look what's happening. There's a giant crevasse being created here on this outcrop. At last they came to the jungle. They looked high and low, but the cunning tiger and the wild wolf were nowhere to be seen. Wherever can they be, said Flabby Cat. I bet they've gone to our house, said Sloppy Dog. I bet they're sitting on our sofa. That's just the sort of thing a cunning tiger and a wild wolf would do, said Flabby Cat. So they went home to look for them. Out of the jungle, back over the mountains, through deserts and forests and fields, over the sea, into the city and the street where they lived. They ran indoors. There they are, shouted Sloppy Dog, pointing at the mirror, and right there, standing in front of the sofa, were none other than the wild wolf and the cunning tiger. Or so they thought. But the wolf was Sloppy Dog, all strong and slim from climbing and walking, and the tiger was Flabby Cat, all sleek and trim from striding and stalking. They gazed at their reflections, and for the first time in a long time, they felt really comfortable with who they were, all of which had nothing to do with the size of their sofa. And everything to do with getting off of it. So look at them now. Sloppy Dog is now totally fit. Look at him lift that sofa. And Flabby Cat, look at her go, balancing on one hand, doing a handstand on one hand. That's pretty amazing. Wow. So that was Flabby Cat and Sloppy Dog. So what do you think about that? Well, I actually kind of enjoyed that show, that picture book. Yeah. I'm curious and intrigued about that phrase, or so they thought. I mean, what does that mean? You know, what it means is that that's what they perceived, what they believed about what was going on, though it might not have been true. It's pretty funny. Or so they thought. Or so they thought. I wonder if I should use that phrase very often. Or so I thought. I'll think about it. So let's see. Before I wrap things up today, I was thinking about my own personality traits. I wanted to convey to you what at least I thought today were my dominant and signature personality characteristics. And I've got them a list over here to the side, and I'll be referring to it occasionally. But I want to just briefly touch on some of the characteristics that I think can be found in my personality. Just for your edification, just so that you can get to know me a little bit better. So one of the, I think, essential characteristics of who I am in terms of my personality is optimism. I have this boundless optimism, this hope about the future. I don't know where it comes from. It's really hard to keep me down, even if things go really badly. I'm really not quite, I think it might be a trait related to hardy people, that grew up on the savannah, in the African savannas. I think it's a trait of Homo sapiens, of human beings. In order to survive, human beings had to really endure through really challenging environmental problems, like getting enough food and enough water, and getting the shelter you need, and staying away from disease and harm from animals. If human beings sort of felt defeated all the time and unable to cope with the challenges of life, then they probably wouldn't have made it as far as they did. Our species have been existing for a good 200,000 years now, and we have survived under the most hostile environmental conditions. If you think about it, the birthplace of humankind is Africa, the savannas of Africa. Those are very hot. Those are very hot and humid conditions. Not a lot of food. Well, not hot so much, dry now anyway. Though, the Middle Eastern countries are super duper hot. They're incredibly hostile environments where you don't have a lot of water. You've got the Tigris, Euphrates, and the Nile, and you stick close to those bodies of water, because if you didn't, well, you dehydrate pretty quick. And there's something about optimism that I think was probably selected for by our environment, and it's a trait that I have in spades. So that's one. Creativity. I think creativity is also one of those really boundless traits that I have, or at least I think I've got them, or so I thought I've had them. I think creativity is a big part of my personality. I'm always trying to think about different perspectives and get effective in one or another way, always trying to find a better solution, and I'm creatively problem solving all the time. Well, I just looked at the time and I'm about to run out of it. So I think we're just going to stay at creative and optimistic as two of my dominant personality traits for now. It's kind of funny. I don't do a whole lot of planning for these presentations, but it's easy for me to go 35 minutes and not even bat an eye. So, yeah, that's also a wonderful trait of mine. Anyway, I hope you have a wonderful day. And I hope that, life is giving you what you think you need. And that I hope you are enjoying the company of others and learning every day and just in awe about your life and all the good things around you, all your wonderful family and friends and all of your friendly relations. We're all here to support you, and we love you just the way you are. Peace.